Hello everyone, welcome to Sunya IAS. This is your lecture number actually 3. It's although written 2. I'll explain this how. This is your lecture number 3 actually, class number 3 regarding your ongoing series on NCERTs, and I'm taking your history topics. Now, the thing over here is in lecture number 2, there were certain sections which were left out. So first we'll be doing it. I'll be summarizing lecture number 2 also in a bit, and then we'll be moving to lecture number 3. Okay, so since in the last lecture we have discussed the beginning of the European settlements, we discussed in detail, and I'll explain what we actually discussed in the last lecture. So we discussed in detail about the various trade routes, how in the ancient and the medieval times the world handled the trades, and then 1453 how everything changed, okay, after the fall of the Constantinople. We discussed evolution of global trade dynamics, what role Treaty of Tordesillas played in 1494, and aftermath of that Iberian Peninsula, basically Spain and Portugal, what they did after that. We discussed that. So those things we have done. Then we talked in detail about the role of the Portuguese, and in a way the biggest for the time period of the 15th and the 16th century. Portuguese were the supreme power, supreme European power in Indian subcontinent. It was not the British, not the French, nor anyone else. It was the Portuguese. So I've explained those things. I explained the role of the Portuguese also in controlling the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean region. So those things we have done already. Dutch, there was a small role of theirs, and we have discussed that thing. We emphasized a lot on the English, how they started their trade, how they got the possession initially in 1616, or they got the possession in 1613 itself to open a port in Surat, and then they opened actually it in 1616. Before that also 1611 they had a factory in Machilipatnam. So those things we have discussed. I have explained you that how when in examination it will be asked to you that the first British or first English factory in India has to be Machilipatnam 1611, but first English factory in Mughal Empire, that will be Surat. Okay, so that has to be kept in mind. Now, after that, we discussed in detail about the Golden Farmar, what was its long-term implications, internal organizations of the company, we have covered that part, and then we were discussing about the Anglo-French struggle. And in the Anglo-French struggle also, we discussed the first Anglo-French, first Carnatic War, the second Carnatic War, and the third Carnatic War still left out in the session, and that is something we will discuss. Okay, and its consequences and those things will also be discussed in this session. Okay, so these things have been discussed. Okay, I'm not going to go each and every side again. Please watch the previous lecture. You will be able to go through the okay. So first second Anglo-Carnatic War was done. So second Anglo-Carnatic War ended in 1754, and it didn't took very much longer to start the third Anglo-Carnatic War actually. And you will see that the third Anglo-Carnatic War happened between 1757 and 1763. Now you need to understand this was a part of a global war. So what is this global war? Now you will read about it in much more detail in the world history portion, but just to give you a better example, but just to make you understand it right now, understand it like this, that look, first, oh, just give me a moment. Yeah, first World War, okay, happened between 1914 and 1980. So for those students who are totally new and don't have any clue about uh, history in detail, so first World War happened between 1914 and 1980. Okay? In this World War, Britain, France, and Russia and America also were on the same side. Russia withdrew it beforehand itself, and America joined this war very late. And Britain and France won this war against Germany, Austria, and Ottoman Empire. Okay. The second World War happened between 1939 and 1945. It was fought again. Britain, America, and Russia were on the same side, and Germany, Italy, and Japan were on the other side. Now, these wars are considered as the global war. But even when these things were not even in the picture, when America was not even in the picture, even then there was a global war. The first global war, or the global war before the World War, and that is this 7-year war, which is actually not 7-year war, but actually lasted for 9 years between 1756 and 1763. Okay, so officially 1756, but some places it's stated that started in 1754 itself. So that's why, although it's called a 7-year war, some people say it lasted for 9 years. Now, this war, this 7-year war, was fought on 5 continents. Okay, on 5 continents. So basically, it was fought in what we now call as North America. Okay, it was fought in India, so basically Asia. It was also seen to be fought in China, that will be included in Asia only. It was fought in Europe. It was fought in Africa, West Coast, and some of the fighting also took on coast of South America and Caribbean. Okay, so all these places this war was fought. So before First and Second World War, this was the biggest war. And when I'm saying India, so few of the wars which were fought in this period, which have larger impact, one among them was this Carnatic affair, the Third Carnatic War. Okay, even the Battle of Plassey, if you don't know about it, don't worry, we will be discussing about it in much more detail in upcoming lecture. So Battle of Plassey is also something which is considered a part of this. Okay, so but we will be coming to Battle of Plassey when we will be discussing Bengal in detail in chapter number 4, lecture number 4 in detail. Okay, now, so we have done till Second Carnatic War. We have to start the Third Carnatic War, and it was a part of this 7-year war. First of all, part of the 7-year war, which you need to know, and that's why the whole explaining was done. Fine. Now, Battle of Plassey, we will be coming to it, but understand this much only, that in the Battle of Plassey, the Britishers won against the native rulers in Bengal, and this outcome made British East India Company the superior European power in the 18th century. Just keep this thing in mind. Okay, we'll be coming to in details of Battle of Plassey in the next chapter. Since it is written in book in this here, that's why we are referring it. Otherwise, we usually refer to the whole Carnatic affair after Battle of Plassey, so the making sure that this confusion don't come. But okay, fine, we'll be doing it in the order as it is given in NCERT. So just keep in mind the Battle of Plassey. There was a war there was a battle which happened in Bengal where the native ruler of Bengal lost, and it gave the authoritative superiority to the British East India Company. Right. So under these circumstances, the French East India Company wanted to do something, and Dupleix was already sent back. So the new official who came, his name was Count de Lille. Count de Lille wanted to do something and somewhat take revenge also for what was done to his predecessor, somewhat also to further his own agenda as a part of the global war, because global war is going on. If he wins in Carnatic, that will have a great significance for his role. So keeping these things in mind, what he did is he planned, let's do something and let's take over the very Fort St. George. So the first Carnatic War, what the plan Dupleix had in 1746. Now the same objective this new Governor General of French India also had. Okay, that is, he wanted to take the Madras. Okay, Fort St. George of British East India Company, Madras. That is his agenda. Now, the problem is, this time he didn't had any money, because in 1754 itself, the French government decided that we are not interested in investing too much in the French East India Company's fighting ideas. Okay, their whole idea of winning battles against Indian native rulers, they are not interested. So he had to arrange money from his own sources, and then he can do whatever he wants. But he also knew that in the second Carnatic War also, the Raja, the Maratha ruler in Deep South, was someone who was involved, was in cahoot with the Britishers. So immediately what he did something interesting. He immediately, Governor General Comte de Lille attacked Tanjore. Okay, and the local ruler of Tanjore was asked to pay 50 lakh rupees. Okay, the idea was that once he'll have that 50 lakh rupees, he will use that money to start a battle against Fort St. George. So Tanjore didn't have that kind of money, and as well as they asked for British help. And British sent their most efficient army officer they then had, Sir Eyre Coote. Okay, Sir Eyre Coote. Okay, here is here. And finally, Sir Eyre Coote and Tom de Lille fought a battle. And you need to understand this thing, that this battle is called as Battle of Vendivosh. Now, when I'm saying this Battle of Vendivosh, actually in Tamil Nadu there is a place called as Vandavasi. Vandavasi. But because of the anglicization of the language, the place has been pronounced as Vandivosh. Now, what is the importance of this Battle of Vandivosh? Now, this Battle of Vandivosh is the only battle fought between two European companies directly. Although even this time the fighting forces on the ground were natives only, but the fighting companies were both European, both sides were European, and this was only one such instance. And here the Britishers won. Okay, so that's the whole importance of Battle of Vandivosh, which was fought. British victory forced French retreat, but even this was fought in 1760. Even after this victory, British were not done yet, and they followed. When the French retreated to Fort Louis in Pondicherry, British followed them, and this time they captured the Pondicherry's French factory, Fort St. Louis. Now understand this thing, that in the first Carnatic War, the French took over British factory. In the third Carnatic War, the British took over the French factory. Okay, so both sides done at least once, taken over other people's property. Now, how this whole issue got resolved? This issue was only resolved in 1763 when Treaty of Paris was signed. Okay, so in this Treaty of Paris, it was decided that the French will reduce their political influence in Indian subcontinent. They will just remain as a trading organization. They will not have any long-term political ideas, and hence they were returned the factory in Pondicherry. Now, this Treaty of Paris is also important for other things, and I'll give you a basic idea because it will be useful for you. So, this is something Treaty of Paris which you will be reading in much more detail in your world history section. But Treaty of Paris 1763, the main outcome was not this settlement on India's front, but the main outcome was you can write this thing. Treaty of Paris, the main outcome was regarding the end of 7-year war. Okay, and English victory North America. And another thing which you need to know, this thing done, this, or you can write it like this. This Treaty of Paris actually became the foundational issue which led to American Revolution. And subsequently American independence. So always remember, the American independence, although is celebrated in 1776, but the Americans got their independence in actuality legally only in 1783. Okay, that is another Treaty of Paris. So this is the first one which you have to remember here, not the second one. Don't get confused in this. The second Treaty of Paris is a separate thing that has nothing to do with India. This one is an outcome. This 1763 Treaty of Paris is also related to the Carnatic affair. Okay, so this is your third Anglo-Carnatic war. Now, the thing which you need to understand that in the civil service examination, as well as even the way the questions will be asked in the initial stages, even in the NCERT books, the questions are framed a bit differently. Now, what I mean when I'm saying differently, what I'm saying is that these Anglo-Carnatic war, the questions won't be asking you about specific instances. Instances won't be asked. They will be more concerned. The examination organizations, whether it's UPSC or anyone else, they are more concerned about having causes, consequences, and things in that order. Okay, so what were the causes and what are the consequences of the Anglo-Carnatic War, or just the Carnatic War will be much better here right now. Okay, so there were political causes, economic causes, and other, as well as similarly political and economic consequences. So I won't be giving you too much dictations on these things. Okay, I won't be explaining a lot to you. It has already been done. Why it has been written separately is to give you a perspective that look, this is how the question is asked. And most of the time, even though students have already gone through the topic in detail, even though they know the answer very well, they are not able to articulate it on the sheet of paper only because they don't have this perspective, oh, ऐसे लिखना है. That is absent. Therefore, I'm telling you that thing here. For example, the political causes of the Anglo-Carnatic struggle are, first of all, if someone asks you what are the political causes and all, so you'll say that aspirations of the European companies, this whole Carnatic struggle, okay, why it happened? It happened because the European companies were trying to move a stage up from the trading companies to political stakeholders. So it was the aspiration of the European companies. So what we have done, you have already been taught that what Duplex did, okay, what British company did, okay, whether they were in the second Carnatic war, they were supporting other sides in the succession war, in both in Carnatic and Hyderabad. But why they were doing it? They were doing it to get or increase their political influence. Okay, so it was their aspiration, okay, to play a important and bigger role. So aspiration of European companies is one of the major political reasons. Then succession crisis in Carnatic and Hyderabad in itself was reason, because it ultimately that was the foundational reason for the second Carnatic war. And the third one, the global underlying causes, which again played a very vital role both in the first and the third Carnatic. First, the issue of Austro-Hungarian Empire. I have taught you in detail that it was the crisis of succession crisis of Austro-Hungarian Empire, influenced by which Duplex, trying to impress his masters, okay, went on to start the whole plan to take over the factory in Madras. Okay, so Austrian succession crisis, or don't write it Austrian, actually it will be better if you write Austro-Hungarian. Okay. Okay, the ruler was Maria Theresa. The second one is 7-year war, 1756 to 17. Cool. So those were the political causes. Now we'll move to the economic causes of the Anglo-Carnatic struggle. French and the English companies trying to monopolize trade on the Coromandel coast. I have taught you that thing in the first Anglo-Carnatic war, that the main intention why Duplex was trying to take over the British factory in Madras was to take over the trade from the southern part of India. Okay, and Nawab of Arcot's aspiration to take over Fort St. George, okay, the factory. So these are both can be included in the economic reason why the Anglo-Carnatic war happened. Other causes, you can put the individual aspiration of Joseph Duplex. Now let me remind you this thing. Actually, I have taught these you people something wrong, and let me correct myself. In the past lecture, I have misnamed Joseph Duplex as Joseph Marcus Duplex. He was not Joseph Marcus Duplex. His name was Joseph Francois Duplex. Anyway, no one is going to ask you more than this Duplex only. Okay, this is all which is important. But since I have teaching you, I shouldn't be wrong to such an extent. So his middle name was not Marcus. His middle name was Francois. Okay, so just keep that thing in mind. The third is the Maratha involvement. That is also one of the other reasons you can keep. And if you are forgetting what the Maratha involvement was, so remember that it was in the second, okay, Carnatic war. Okay, yeah. So okay, so this part is clear. Let's move forward. The political consequences of Anglo-Carnatic struggle. Now, this is again something important because I have told you that what actually happened, but what was its consequence as such when we say the term consequence. So when we are looking into it, the first of all, the first battle of Amber, that itself, battle of Adyar, that itself taught us a lot. That is the inability of the native rulers. Okay, when the native rulers were with the Carnatic Sultanate, the Nawab of Arcot was not able to win against the European company who didn't even had 1,000 people with them. What it showed, it's the inability or incapability of fighting spirit among the Indian men, or the inexpertise of the Indian native armies. Okay, so that was visible. So inefficiency of native armies was out in the open, and that didn't only happen in Adyar, the Battle of Adyar, but Battle of Amber, where the Nawab of Arcot himself was killed, and then the siege of Arcot also, because in siege of Arcot with 400 horsemen, Clive was able to take over the capital of Carnatic at that time against the Nawab of Carnatic himself. Okay, so all these three are example of this. So look, understand, in the examination, the details of these particular incidents won't be asked to you, but how these particular incidences were important and what role they played in overall development of the happening of those days, that will be asked. Okay, now, so this much is done. Now all the native states ended up with the British supported claimant, and this is obviously understood. uh, Even in the Hyderabad, uh, the new Nawab was more of a neutral guy, and Carnatic anyway ended up in the hands of Muhammad Ali Walaja, okay, who was the son of Anwaruddin, who was British supported claimant. Now, Mughal influence on the native states ended completely, because this was the period when the Mughal authority didn't even issue a single reprimand to either of the stakeholders that what needs to be done, because prior to it, the Carnatic Sultanate was part of Mughal Empire, but when all these things were happening, the Mughals were busy in their own affair, and not even a single letter was issued uh, regarding any of the affairs, any of the issues, that they didn't even try to play any role. So it was very much visible that they are no more a party, they are no more interested or no more capable of handling the situation. So that is done. Treaty of Paris ended French political influence in toto, in a way, because they will again rise up in 1780s. You will see in the case of Carnatic, in case of Mysore, but over here you understand that political consequence of Anglo-Carnatic War is this, that Treaty of Paris ended the French political influence too. Fine. So once political consequences of Anglo-Carnatic War struggle is done, let's move to the economic consequence of Anglo-Carnatic struggle. What are the economic consequences? So European companies' trade rare race ended with British victory. So what is happening? In 1740s, between 1730s and 1740s, the English as well as French were trying to take over as much business as they can, and that is all it was happening. Now you will see that that ended with the French officially out of race with the terms of Treaty of Paris. The British were now free to increase their political influence and so get better deals in terms of trade also. Okay, so this is done. Now France was constrained to few trading ports only, in total 5. Okay, native rulers found themselves in a poorer state, because ultimately what they were doing, they were fighting not once, not twice, but thrice. So in less than 2 decades, all the ruling elite had fought among each other thrice. So what you are thinking will be happening over there? Okay, war. What basically war does? It declines your trade. It make your population insecure and uh, difficult in day-to-day affairs. Now, if these things are happening, it is bound to happen that whole day-to-day affairs of people was very difficult, and that is visible very easily. Okay. Now, British East India Company got favorable trade terms in Karnataka and Hyderabad both. Okay. And that was simple outcome. So that also doesn't need a lot of explaining to do. Okay. So let's move forward. Reason for British victory. What was the major reason for British? Because ultimately British were the victors, and not only they won from the native rulers as happened in Siege of Arcot and all that, but they also won from the European company, that was the French East India Company. So what they did better than the native rulers as well as the French East India. First of all, the British have the naval superiority. Just like the Portuguese had the naval superiority in the 15th and the 16th century, British had the naval superiority in the 17th, 18th, 19th and the 20th century, initial 10 to 20 years. And then the Americans started developing, and in between there was also a German presence, but that is a talk for later issue. Here you need to know that in the 17th and the 18th century, the naval superiority was in hands of the Britishers, and so it played a very important role. Now, financial weakness and inefficient French company. Okay, that is also very important, because I have told you initially itself, when we started discussing about the French East India Company, initially itself I told you that financial weakness was one of the very big problem. And why there was financial weakness? Because it was owned by a government organization. For French East India Company was a French government owned organization. It was not a private body like the British East India Company. So it was inefficient, as well as the French government was not as determined in the investment and overall development of this company. That also was one of the reasons. Then personal ambition of the duplex, that also played a very important role. Okay, so these are some of the reasons for the British victory, because duplex was someone who sometimes, just to boost his own credentials, was ready to take steps, even though in the long terms those steps were going to hamper the overall chances of development of French East India Company. Okay, so these points you can mention. Let's move forward. Okay, yeah, so this section is done now. Let's discuss the questions from this section, and let me go through each of the question one by one. So these are the, if you will be like, sir, ये question कहाँ से है, where these questions are from? These questions are basically from your NCERT book, the old NCERT, Vipin Chandra. Okay. Okay, that's where these questions are from. So what, and don't think, just like if you are in your undergrad, if you are watching this and you are hoping कि sir क्या sir 11th 12th standard के question करा रहे हो, so don't think that way. Believe me, I'll give you an example. In while preparing this course for you guys, I was going through the 8th standard book. Okay, the 8th standard book, and 8th standard book, and the chapter was on Indian princely states, or basically India in the 18th century. And after the whole chapter, there was an exercise that suppose you are ruler of a small kingdom in North India in 1740s. What will you do to foster your kingdom? Now, understand this thing. This is a question in your 8th standard book. The question outrightly says that consider yourself to be a ruler of a small princely state in the 18th century India and North India, and that also specifically says 1740s. So this is immediately after Nadir Shah's invasion of Delhi in 1739. And then it asks that what you will do to make sure that your kingdom evolves, prospers, and then develops. Now, this is a question which has been asked in the 8th standard book. It's mentioned that. And believe me, this is a question that could pretty easily be asked in a interview of a UPSC examination. Okay, it's such a good question. I'm not interested in you to give an answer for this right now. That is not our agenda here. But if you want, you can think about it. But I'm just telling you that just focus on the quality of question. Don't think where these questions are written. Sometimes 6th standard books have certain points which graduation level or post graduation level books don't have. It happens, people. You have to keep a tap on all these things. Okay, so yeah, so coming to the questions, let us go to discuss the first one. Discuss the development of European trade with India from the 15th to the 18th century. Discuss the development of European trade with India from 15th to the 18th century. Now, how you will do this question? You will have to first divide the thing into 15th century, 16th century, 17th century, and 18th century. And then you will write that how the 15th century was led by Portuguese, the 16th century was led by combination of Mughal, Portuguese, 17th saw the decline of Portuguese and rise of English. Okay, and 18 saw the supremacy of English. Now, once you are done this, then you will move on to what the trade was mainly. This is just that who led the trade when. Once you are done with this, then you will move to what actually happened in the trade. Who did the trade? How the trade was done in the coastal region? How trade was connected with the hinterland? Those things you have to mention. Okay. Once you will be done with your lecture number 3, which we are just going to start now, you will be able to add few more points into this, like what the product in the trade was, what India was actually producing, what we were importing, what we were exporting. Those things will be just covered in the upcoming lecture. So once you are done with that, it will be more easier for you. Fine. So that you can do from there. Now the next question is, trace the growth of trade of English East India Company and its influence in India from 1600 to 1744. Now for this, trace the growth, you will write that how in the first quarter of 17th century, that is 1600 to 1625, English East India Company found it immensely difficult to establish even a single factory in the Indian subcontinent. Then 1625 onwards, they were not only allowed to establish factories, but they were allowed to trade. And over the period, one after the other, they were getting these favorable terms, which ultimately conspired to them getting the 1717 Golden Farman, which ultimately was the most favorable terms anyone had got till now when it came to trade. Okay, so you have to mention that over here. Okay, so unless and until in this question you will mention about the Farooq Shiar Farman, your question will not be considered finished. Okay, so that is important. Now, I'm just giving you some of the lines. I'm hoping that you will attempt these questions on your own time. Okay. Now, what were the factors which contributed to the Anglo-French struggle in South India? How did it lead to the subversion of the Indian political power? Now, the question is, what are the factors which led to the Anglo-French struggle in South India? So basically, all the pointers I just mentioned it here, that political causes of Anglo-Carnatic struggle, economic causes, all these three, plus these two, these can directly be mentioned as the political causes for Anglo-French struggle in South India. How it led to the subversion of the Indian political power? For this, you need to make sure that you highlight that how the loss of the native rulers, okay, first on the military level and then on the political control level, effectively made the Indian native ruling elite subservient to the European power. Okay. So here you can mention about the Battle of importance of Battle of Adyar, Siege of Arcot. Those things can be mentioned here. Now, write short notes on. Okay, so these are something which is expected of you, that you know somewhere now 50 words on each of these things. But since we are trying to make you prepared, we will focus that you should know at least 100 words, 50 words. So the Portuguese in India. Okay, so let me tell you a few more things about the Portuguese in India, because we only have discussed the negative impact of them. So they're coming in and bringing the Catholicism and making churches also on the West Coast. Okay, those things have discussed already. They were also the first to bring potato to India. Okay, and that's why if you'll go, basically in Portugal it is called as batata. So if you'll go to even now in the west coast of India, in Konkani region, potato is usually called as batata. Okay, and even the potato is the anglicized word for batata. Okay, that's P and B thing doesn't works that well. Okay, because the something which is called as the Arabians used to call it as the potato as batato, something like that works out. So basically it's the same thing. Then they also brought in this whole idea of using tobacco. So tobacco was also not present, so they only bought it. So those things you can just mention that there are also certain things which they brought along. Okay. Beyond this, their whole policy of blue water, okay, their use of Kadzat and having commanding over the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean, that is expected that you must be knowing by now. So you can mention that. Now, trade in spices. This is something which is expected. By now you must be knowing it, that this trade of spices actually led to the Europeans taking this inadvertent tour of around African coast and coming to India. So this trade in spices actually was the most important thing. The trade of spices not only took place only in Indian subcontinent, but it also included the Southeast Asia. So it's all whole of East Indies. And when we are talking about trade in spices, make sure that you don't only ponder on writing Vasco da Gama coming to India and taking all the spices. Okay, but you also mentioned the importance of East Indies. That means India as well as the Southeast Asia. So Java, Sumatra, I told you that Jakarta was called as Batavia back then. So those things you can mention, and then how the Dutch East India Company, who were emphasizing on trading only in spices and mostly in spices, they were more interested in trading with Southeast Asia than even Indian subcontinent. So those things can be mentioned. The Dutch in India, again, similar points can be covered in. For those, let me remind you once that the Dutch were initially trading through the Portuguese channels, but when the Dutch and the Spanish came, the Portuguese and the Spanish came close, and the Dutch was thrown out of the whole trading route in 1595. Ultimately, they established their own new company, the Dutch East India Company, in 1602. They started coming in on their own in 1620s, and from there onwards, they traded. Although their interest was much more in Southeast Asia, and that is visible and that is mentioned. Now, the next one is Aurangzeb and the East India Company. So in that, you can in detail mention the Child's War, or basically Child's, instead of Child's War, just write the Anglo-Mughal War. Okay. And the organization of the English East India Company's factories in India. Okay. So for that, you have to just mention all the timing of the factories which were started in India and when it was established. Duplex, you can obviously write by now at least 100 words on Joseph Francois duplex. What you need to know is, once he was called back in 1754, he didn't had a lot of money for himself, and he lived his last few years in quite a poor state, okay, back in France. The French East India Company, again, few of the important things. Government owned company, not give me a moment. Yeah, government owned company, not had a lot to invest, not very efficient, didn't had the great naval power, naval supremacy as the French, as the British had, but still were able to trade and maintain their presence in the early part of 17th century, 18th century, and played a far more vital role in the second half of the 18th century. And we will be discussing about it while discussing more on the Anglo-French struggle, Anglo-Mysore struggle. Okay, so even if you are trying to write this answer, make sure that once we will be done with the Anglo-Mysore struggle, you will find it more easy. Okay, so that thing you have to keep in mind. Fine, so this much is done. I hope this is understandable. Okay, yeah, that was it. So yeah, so it's done. Let's move to the next lecture now. The Indian states and society in the 18th century. Okay, so this is what we are going to start. So it's on the screen, and we are almost going to start it now. So just okay. So this much portion is clear. We are going to start the next lecture now. The lecture chapter number 3 actually, if you go as per the old NCERT, but in the series chapter number 3, lecture number 3, but I will refer to the old Bipin Chandra NCERT. This is mentioned in the chapter number 2 over there. So why I did that, again I'm explaining this thing, that the European settlements in India, the chapter has been taken as chapter number 3, Bipin Chandra. I prefer it to first complete and then move forward. Okay, so chapter number 2 of Bipin Chandra, and some of the chapters in uh, class 7th NCERT, lecture number chapter number 10. So class 7 NCERT is again medieval history book, but is handling the issues of the last stages of the medieval, last stages of the Mughal Empire. So that's why we are taking some of the pointers from there. So basically, when I was referring to it, I found some of the pointers over there, which is referable when you are talking about this topic. That is the Indian states and society in the 18th century. Okay, so let's move forward and discuss that what we are going to exactly discuss. So in the 18th century Mughal Empire, the whole disintegration process. So I've already taught you that the majority of disintegration in the Mughal Empire took place during the times of Muhammad Shah Rangila. It although started in the times of Farrukh Shiar itself, the first big first big province to get a heritage Subedar was Bengal in form of Mushid Quli Khan during the time of Farrukh Shiar only. But with the coming of Muhammad Shah Rangila, you will see Sadat Khan in Awadh, uh, then Nizamul Mulk in Hyderabad. Okay, so this starts getting as not a one-off thing, but hereditary becomes the norm of the day. So we'll be discussing about the Rajputs in the 18th century, Kerala, rise and fall of the Jats, Rohilla and the Pangas Pathan, Awadh, and then we'll also be talking about the social and the economic condition of the people, the trade, education, social and cultural life, and situation of women. Now, this people make sure जो नीचे वाला section है, that is social and the economic condition of the people. This is far more important than you are thinking it to be. Again and again, I am mentioning that while preparing for becoming a civil servant, uh, the idea should not be to learn more about the ruling elite. The idea should be know about the life and the difficulties and the solutions of the 18th century India. What were the people like? What were their difficulties? How they used to resolve their difficulties? What is the similarity between them and now? In those things you have to focus on. Okay. So trade, education, social and cultural life of the people, situation of women, these are something which you are expected to give more importance. There will be questions if come from this chapter, from this section, right? Chances of a question coming from the top section is lesser, the bottom section is. Don't think that what the top section actually looks better, so people think it's important. Not that. Now, 18th century India, and this is a bit clumsy map. Let me make a map for you guys here. That will be better instead of doing. So, suppose, okay, Kashmir goes to like Myanmar. Well, that's not doesn't look very perfect map, but let me just correct this thing like a Indian. Yeah, far more. Not too good, but still doable. So understand now. Suppose this is your Delhi and this is your Agra. In the 18th century, for the Mughals, these are the most. Now this is the region of Rajputan. Okay. Okay. Now in between here is the region between the Rajputana where the Delhi you will find the Jats. Over here you will find the Rohilla Pathans or Rohilla Afghans. Okay, this is your Bengal. This is your Marathas. This is your Travancore. Okay, got it? A basic idea where what is on the Indian map. Now, just superimpose this idea on this map. So now you have, suppose this is your Delhi. Okay, so you have Jats, you have Sikh, you have Rajputs, you have Pathans, and Bangas Pathan was just one of the character among the Rohilla Afghans. Goal was a bit more important, so I've mentioned his complete name. So that's here, Bangas Pathan. Awadh, Bengal, Hyderabad, Karnataka. Now, we will be discussing this thing in much more detail, but just to give you an idea, because there are certain students who find it difficult sometimes to remember the whole thing, okay, story wise. So for those students, just remember this thing, that these are the these are the characters who led the whole story in specific region. That's it. Okay. For rest of the students, I'll be doing the whole story, don't worry. So Awadh was led by Sadat Khan, Bengal by Murshid Quli Khan, Hyderabad by Nizam ul Mulk Ashraf Jahan Chin Kulich Khan. His name is such a long thing because sometimes we just write Nizam ul Mulk, sometimes we call him Ashraf Jahan, sometimes we call it, his actual name was Chin Kulich Khan only. Nizam ul Mulk was a title, Ashraf Jahan was dynastic name. Then Karnataka, Sadullah Khan, Maratha under Chhatrapati Shivaji, Travancore, Martand Verma actually brought the whole place into prominence. Mysore, Wadiyas, Hyder Ali, and Rajputs. There are two important players here. I'm from Amber Jai Singh and Mewar Ajit Singh. So basically, Jaipur Jai Singh and Jodhpur Ajit Singh. Okay, Jats were led by Raja Churaman. Okay, the Jat province around Bharatpur was established in 1695. Although they reached their epitome during the time of Surajmal, and I'll explain you how and why it happened, why in 1640s only, why in the Surajmal only. Those things will be the upcoming slides. You just have a basic idea on the screen that what is happening there. We'll start with the one by one doing. We'll start with the Rajput, then we'll move to the Sikh, then we'll move to the Jat, and then the Pathan, and then of it in the coming section. Okay, these bigger states, their stories will be in UNCERT. Some portion their social economic life is explained in chapter, and then chapter number 4 is basically what happened the crisis. So what we have done is these the bigger provinces like Bengal, like Awadh, okay, Hyderabad, Karnataka, Marathas, these will be done together in chapter number 4 itself. So that if you just keep these two different places, it will make difficult for you only to understand. Okay. Okay. So let's start with the Rajputs in the 18th century. As you can see on the map, the Rajputana region. Okay. First of all, back then there was no Jaipur. Jaipur is a bit. So when we are talking about Rajputana, let's go back. Let me. While Aurangzeb was present, he was not giving any importance to these folks. Rajputs were cashed or cut on from the Mughals. Fine. After Aurangzeb, when the new his Bahadur Shah came, Bahadur Shah kind of maintained neutrality. Then you see Jahandar Shah gave bit more importance to the Rajputanas and their rulers. Then Farrukh Shah gave them more importance. You will see that Muhammad Shah Rangila will give them more importance, and so much so that by 1722, Jai Singh will become the Subedar of Agra itself. Now, Agra is the ancestral, historical Mughal capital, and that is given under the Subedari of Jai Singh. Okay, all the riches of Jaipur even now is from the Agra. Okay, the Subedari of Jai Singh from Agra. So how this was happening? Why it was happening? It was happening because uh, the Mughal emperor were looking urgently for allies, and Rajput were the much needed allies because they were closer and they had a military might of their own. So them, the Rajputs, being with the Mughal ruler, resolved a lot of issues of that. Okay, so Bahadur Shah first tried to take over the Rajput region, but soon realized his military limitation and maintained neutrality. After 1712, Raja Ajit Singh of Jodhpur was given Subedari of Gujarat. He annexed Nagaur from Mughals to that also. In 1713, Raja Jai Singh was given Subedari of Malwa. In 1722, Jai Singh was made the Subedar of Agra, and he annexed Bundi in the coming times. And so the whole area of Rajput, okay, this is your Agra, just next to Rajputana, and therefore the Subedari was also given to the Jai Singh. Okay, so that is the what happened with the Rajput. You might also ask that what happened after that. After that, what happened? Let me explain this, although that is not mentioned anywhere in your NCERT, and that is also not needed for you. But let me explain that thing. Story को आधा छोड़ना नहीं चाहिए. So basically, in 1730s, in 1730s, Marathas rise reduced Rajputs to regional level. Okay, so just to mention for you, this is not mentioned anywhere in your studies, but can ask that if they were growing, Rajputs were growing, so what went wrong after that? Because I've just mentioned that they were growing. And if they were growing, that something must have happened wrong. That's why we don't get to know Rajputs' important role against the Britishers in the long run. Because you have a story like an Anglo-Maratha war, have a story like an Anglo-Mysore war. You never get to know about Anglo-Rajput war. Why? Reason is because in this period only, during the time of Baji Rao first, the Maratha Peshwa in 1720 and 1740, the Rajput were reduced to regional power, and therefore, when the Britishers came to prominence, Rajputs were in no position to fight them directly, and they easily aligned with the with the Britishers. Okay, so that thing you keep in mind. If you get confused, that where the hell Rajputs went right from the between of the story. Okay, so once Rajput is done, what happened with? Let's move to the second section, and that is Kerala. So the Kerala is in deep south. To understand this thing, that what we now call as Kerala is was not like that. It's not all that easy. Okay. Kerala had four different. First, the Calicut. Okay, it was ruled by the Zamorin. Then Chirakkal, Kochikor, and Travancore. Okay, these were the four important sections in wise, and you will see that over the period of time, the Zamorin will lose battle Hyder Ali of Mysore, and then will burn his own family along with himself. That's how his dynasty will end. Okay, the Zamorin rulers. So, Calicut in a way is more somewhat controlled by Mysore for a time being. Otherwise, Cochin had a prominent presence for a bit long, and Travancore by 1729 comes into prominence under the rulership of Martand Verma. Okay, it's Martand and not Maranda. Okay. Martand Verma. So under the leadership of Martand Verma, Travancore became one of the prominent states, and they actually achieved more prominence than many other powers. The reason is very simple. Uh, Kerala is on the west coast, easily accessible with the oceanic route, the Arabian Peninsula, and the East African continent. So because of that, the trade routes have been evolved from the ancient times. They were very active, and so the connectivity of the Western world, Arabian world, African world, and the Western world was there already in the Travancore, and so Travancore boomed on its own. Okay, very soon Martand Verma ended the local rebellions also of Quilun and Ilidium, and defeated the Dutch and ended their political presence in Kerala. He organized his army on the western lines. Okay, and he undertook many irrigation projects, bold. So social level work he did a lot. 1763, present day Kerala had only three big states: Cochin, Travancore, and Calicut. The crisis with Mysore started with Hyder Ali coming to power, and you will see when we'll be again talking about the Anglo-Mysore struggle. The yeah, the third Anglo-Mysore War was something which was caused because of Mysore crisis with Travancore. Okay, so that you have to keep that how that interstate, inter-provincial rivalry led to the involvement of Britishers in the native affairs. Okay, yeah. So let's move forward. That's the story. That's the part about Kerala you need to know now. Let's talk about the charts. Now, I was trying to explain this map to you more easily, visible now. That this is section is the Rajputs, Jaipur. This is your Delhi. Although Delhi was the Mughal area, but around it everything was Jat influence. And on the eastern side is Rohilkhand, controlled from Bareilly basically, and it was led by the Rohilla Afghans. Okay. Now, if you'll see here, so what happened? Uh, in the 1669 as well as 1688, there have been two instances of uprising, Jat uprising against the extensive revenue demands of the Mughal Empire. So these were the times. 1669 was one because that was a drought year, but 1688 was basically with the increasing expenses of controlling the Deccan. Okay, because the war had started there, and 1688 was the year in which the war against the Marathas was in the final phase for Aurangzeb. So in that time, the revenue demand was more. That also led to the uprising of the Jats against the Mughals. So these kind of uprising of the Jats, because Jats were basically 95% agriculturist, all of them were. So you will see that in these difficult times only, in 1690, when Aurangzeb was nowhere around in Delhi, was stationed in Aurangabad, in Deccan, handling the Maratha crisis. So what happened is two of the Jat rulers, Suraman and Badan Singh, came into prominence. They established this new Jat kingdom in and around Bharatpur. Bharatpur bird sanctuary, everyone must have heard about. It's next to Agra in Rajasthan, although, but next to Agra. So this region, okay, that's where Bharatpur is, and that's where they established them. And from there evolved this whole Jat dominance story. Okay? The Jat state of Bharatpur was set up by Churaman and Badan Singh between 1756 and 16. They reached their glory in the Surajmal. He was a later on ruler, basically in 1740. Let me tell you how under Suraj, because once Nadir Shah invaded and looted Delhi city for more than worth of 70 crore rupees, Delhi was after that open for anyone to come in and do anything. And that is what happened. Because once Nadir Shah left Delhi, the not only Delhi but also Agra, the Jats also took their chances and actually raided the towns in Delhi and Agra both. A very famous story that there were silver doors on outside the Taj Mahal and Jats took it. Those things happened, and the riches which the Jats got from there, it was invested in the making of Bharatpur, which then excelled in the time of. Okay, so the most important ruler for them in a way was Surajmal because he got the wealth in the aftermath of the 1739 Nadir Shah invasion, and but the founders were the Churaman and Badan Singh. Okay, uh, the at the maximum, their whole territory was between Ganga in the east, Agra in the west, Delhi in the north, and the Chambal in the south. Such a big territory the Jats controlled for some time. Okay, so that what you can know. Uh, the Jats on the connectivity level, you need to understand the Jats were not doing excellent. So these were very nominal people, okay, and not very much connected. Like these are not people on the lines of Martand Verma. These are not people who are trying to develop a westernized army or trying to develop some system on the lines of Western ideas because of their connectivity with international trade. So these things were not happening in among the Jats. They were very primitive, idealistic people who were interested in their agriculture, and since the Mughals were putting in too much taxation of it on them, when they got a chance to rebel and form their own kingdom, they did so. Nothing beyond that, and not very much has to be seen into that. Although about Surajmal, it is stated famously that he was considered a very shrewd politician of his time. Although he didn't spoke a single word of Persian or Sani, all he spoke was Braj Bhasha. Okay, but he knew what was he doing politically. That's just now. Rohilla and Bangas Pathan. Now, I told you that when I was teaching you people about Farooq Shiar, I have told you that look, Farooq Shiar was someone who, in the demise when his father Mushan was dead, he declared himself to be the ruler. Although Jahandar Shah was in power in Delhi, and so he went into hiding and he established himself at a place, and that place only later on became Farrukhabad, which is in UP right now. Now, this place, Farrukhabad, why he was allowed and how he was placed there? Because one of the Mughal Subedar, his name was Khan Bangas, okay, Muhammad Khan Bangas, was stationed in Farrukhabad, and he supported the claim of Farrukh Shia. He supported the claim of Farrukh Shia. So when once Farrukh Shia came to power, it was but natural that the role of Muhammad Khan Bangash was increased by Delhi Fort. And this was the first time when the Rohilla Afghans came into prominence, and they got far more prominence than ever the Pathan Rohilla Afghans used to get. Okay, so Muhammad Khan Bangash became so important. Uh, he was given Subedari of a huge area, the region between Aligarh and Kanpur. Okay, this is also one of the region. Till the region, the Kanpur was actually controlled by the Rohilla Afghans, and from there onwards, the whole area of Awadh started. And even now, if you see in the lifestyle, although Lucknow and Kanpur are mostly like 70-80 kilometers apart, but if you see the culturally, they are very vivid. Okay, so why is it so? That is because the Kanpur region, till the Kanpur, was mostly controlled by the Rohilla Afghans, and Awadh was in control of a separate Subedari, and later on it was under the control of the uh, Shia family, Sadat Khan's family. Okay, In the aftermath of the Nadir Shah's invasion of 1739, Ali Muhammad Khan carved out a territory in Rohilkhand between Ganga and Kumaon. He ruled from Bareilly, and so you might have heard about the royal family of the Rampur. Okay, that whole family from here, because in the aftermath of Nadir Shah's invasion, Ali Muhammad Khan, again a local strongman at the time, he carved out territory. No one stopped him back then. Okay, Rohilkhand between Ganga and Kumaon hills, and he ruled from Bareilly and Rampur. Okay, both the areas. And you might have heard about the, you haven't, but you Google it. The Enemy Property Act. Okay, if you haven't heard about it, let me write it separately. If you haven't heard about it, make sure you do, because you have to in your polity. Enemy Property Act. It was brought in by Government of India in 2016. It basically states that the rule says that if there is a property owned by someone who is now a citizen of an enemy state is any state with whom we don't have a friendly relation and have been fought to in the past. So, for example, right now China and Pakistan, or Government of India can declare any state also enemy state. So we haven't yet, obviously, but though two countries are there which we have some enemy state status. So suppose someone is there, has this status, is a citizen of either China and Pakistan, and has some property. Now that person is not going to come into India and claim that property, because is not going to allow that. Belongs to an enemy state, and the money, the profit he will earn from the here, that property, can then be used by the enemy state against India. Okay, so this Enemy Property Act, case of Pakistan, is a very big issue, because there are a lot of the families in India where parents have gone to Pakistan, children have stayed on in India, and creating an issue that who actually owns the property. And this was the case in 2006. The net worth of the whole property more than 1 lakh crore. Okay, and the property belonged to the royal family of Rampur. And some will say is that one of the major reason for Enemy Property Act was brought in. The major reason why the government brought this Enemy Property Act 2016 was to use the sovereign domain of the government of India to take over these properties, for which otherwise if government of India would have tried to pay the family, have become impossible. Okay, so the same family is basically family of Ali Muhammad Khan. Okay, Ali Muhammad Khan. Okay, at a time he controlled the territory in Rohilkhand between Ganga and Kumaon hills, and he ruled from Bareilly and Rampur usually. Okay, now let's talk about Awadh, because in the next chapter there is not a huge amount of Anglo-Awadh struggle. Okay, there is no such a thing. There was obviously a whole issue in 1856 when the Britishers removed the Nawab of Awadh on the charges of maladministration, that is basically misadministration. But that is one of incident. There is no such war or struggle against the Nawab of Awadh. So what actually happened in Awadh? That we need to understand. Okay, otherwise there is always a gap. What happened in Awadh? So in 1722, Burhanul Mulk Sadat Khan. This is actually a title. Okay, Nizamul Mulk, Burhanul Mulk. Okay, Burhan means powerful. Okay, strong man. Burhanul Mulk means in whole of the country the most powerful. Burhanul Mulk Sadat Khan became the Subedar of Awadh. Okay, this was the time of Muhammad Shah Rangila. So Muhammad Shah Rangila appointed him. Okay, Now, instead of talking about like who he fought, what he did, no, we are not interested in that. We are interested in society, the economy, and that's it. So you will see that immediately he came in Faizabad. Back then, Lucknow was not there. Okay, and always remember, Lucknow was established in 1775, not before that. So Faizabad was the capital. So once he came in Faizabad, Sadat Khan, he understood very well that one of the very, very big issues was the inefficiency and corruption in Mansabdari system. So he immediately decided that some action has to be taken against the Jagirdaar. Okay. The province was unstable. Many zamindars established their own militia and were not paying any of the taxes. Sadat Khan had to spend from his own pocket first to curb the rebellion. Then in 1723, he carried out fresh revenue settlement, making sure the inefficiency and corruption in the revenue settlement of the state can be drawn away. Now, after that, he converted the province into hereditary Subedari and was succeeded by Safdar his nephew. Okay, Safdar again later on became very prominent because he acted as the prime minister of Mughal Sultanate. If you are somewhere in Delhi, you will also find the Safdar Hospital, a very famous hospital in Delhi. Now, many of the students are like, who is this Safdar What has he done? Safdar is not from the Mughal family. Okay, this Jung title is not from the Mughal family. These are the royalty in Awadh, but they again and again in 1740s and 50s have played the role of the prime minister of the Mughal empire, and therefore find that Naseer Jung, Safdar these fellows, okay, they have very prominent role here. So Sadat Khan spent his most of this from his pocket, made the whole state uh, workable, established everything, and then he converted the province into hereditary subedari. What is hereditary subedari? Again, if someone knows, know, basically what the idea is, the governors are basically a appointment based position. That is, every time based on your merit, based on your ability, credit essentials, who are appointed on the post of the subedar, that is governor. But in the hereditary subedari, just like someone being crowned based on their hereditary, based on succession line, it is a succession line based system for a subedari position. That even though you are answerable to someone else, then also you are appointed from the family lineup only. Okay. So he converted the province into hereditary subedari and was succeeded by Safdar his nephew, who later on became the Mughal Wazir in 1748. Now, Safdar is again very important because look, Safdar is actually very important because Safdar included very important thing. First of all, he kept on fighting the Rohillas. He kept on fighting the Rohillas and Bangas Pathans people. Why it is important? Because Rohilla Afghans kept on fighting with the Awadh. Awadh fought them. Awadh later on also took the British help in winning over Rohilla Afghans, but that's a story for the 1770s. We're handling it separately. But I'm just trying to give you an idea that the way Uttar Pradesh is right now, the shape is because the region of Saharanpur culturally is not aligned with Lucknow. Okay, why still the whole place is in a single state? Reason is simple. The reason is here. Okay, that the Nawab of Awadh kept on fighting the Rohilla Afghans, and once he won over those areas, he kept those areas in control of Awadh Suba. Okay, now once that point is done with Safdar what's next other thing Safdar did which was important? Now Safdar reached an understanding with the Maratha Peshwa, and keeping in line with that understanding only, Marathas sent their forces when when Ahmad Shah Abdali started coming towards Delhi. The whole third battle of Panipat, in a way, was happening because of this agreement of Safdar. Okay, That's why also need to understand. Okay. Even reached an understanding with the Marathas Peshwa in 1753. Assumption just explain this thing. Yeah. So yeah. So details of this, if you want, you can remember, but although it is not needed for your examination, and it is this portion that no one is going to ask you the amount of the. Let me tell you that. Although let me tell you that the understanding which Safdar as the Prime Minister of Mughal Empire reached with the Marathas was that, look, uh, Mughal Empire will allow you, allow the Marathas to collect cloth from Ajmer, Agra, and regions of Ajmer, Agra, and Sindh, and will provide 50 lakh rupees in cash. And in return, Marathas has to assure that they will come to secure Delhi from any of the attacks from the not only northwest but any of the attacks from anywhere, even internal disturbances. Okay. Now, this particular action of Safdar was something which the king, the Mughal Badshah himself didn't like at all, because Safdar here has assured Marathas that they will be allowed to collect tax from Agra and Ajmer. Ajmer being the Dargah of Chishti, who was in a way uh, something on a godlike level for the Mughals. Mughal were the follower of the Chishti silsila of the Sufi Islam. So, making or allowing the Marathas collect revenue from Ajmer was something totally unacceptable to Mughal Badshah, as well as letting Marathas collect revenue from Awadh, or sorry, Agra, which was historical capital of Mughals, was also unacceptable to the Mughal emperor. So this whole agreement was something which Mughal emperor himself was not in favor of. But you by now have got a basic understanding that Mughal emperors in 1720s, 30s, 40s, and there onwards had not a real worth on the ground. They were just the king in the name. They had their fort, but that's it. Nothing beyond that. Okay? So, understand these points. These are interesting or important points. Okay? The questions will be framed in certain manner. That which of the following Mughal Wazir played an important role in uh, Third Battle of Panipat? And over there will be two or three names, and one name will be from the 16th century, one will be from the 18th century. Okay, and then there will be the one random name from the 18th century, and then there will be a name of Safdar. Okay, so you need to have some basic. Okay, fine. Now let's move to the social and economic conditions of the people. This is something which is very important. Uh, the 18th century India was not able to maintain the progress at the either economic, social, and cultural base. Now, understand again something very important for you. When we are talking about these social economic conditions, what went wrong with India? Because you need to understand, it is famously said that when the Britishers came to the Indian shores, India was producing 24% of the global GDP. The Britishers left the Indian shores, India was mere 2% of the global GDP. So how we decreased from the 24% to 2%? Okay, we have people even now, we had people over then. So people were not the problem. So what happened? What went wrong? So what went wrong is the level of technical advancement, first of all. Okay, the whole zeal of people were lost because poverty was just too much at a certain moment of time. So the progress stopped happening, the economic level, social level, and cultural level, first all at once, and that created the difficulty. The economic inequality was huge. You need to understand that this was the phase of the Jagirdars, the Mansabdars. Okay, so those who were so-called middle class of the Mughal Empire. Okay, they were some of the richest people in the world. So the kind of life they were living was can't be expected of someone in Europe to be living such a life. But the ones who were on the bottommost strata of the society were living such a pathetic life that that was also not expected to live someone in Europe. Okay, so the economic inequality was getting increased on a very huge level. Okay, Indian agriculture was technically backward and stagnant, and I have already mentioned that in the time of Aurangzeb itself himself, uh, the population has increased so much that overall development, uh, overall agriculture was not able to sustain the surplus thing for which it was needed. Okay, that it was no more a profitable industry. Okay, now when it comes to trade, okay, Indian villages in a way were self-sufficient. So you feel even now if you'll see Indian villages are kind of self-sufficient when it comes to fooding and lodging. Okay, those things. So things are somehow manageable on the local level itself. So that was the basic idea. But India was a major exporter of products, and handicraft and those things that if you'll see were exported from India in huge amount. Okay, not textile industry is only one thing. Even beyond textile, a lot of things were exported from India. Okay, so let's have a look on the things which were exported and this is something which you might find a bit difficult to remember, and you might find consider that I should mug it up. But understand this is very important that uh, what are the things which are exported from India? Okay, and then we'll look into what were the things which were imported to India. So exported things: raw silk, silk fabric, hardware, indigo, saltpeter, opium, rice, wheat, pepper, other spices, precious stone, and drugs. Drugs not in cocaine, drugs in very type of herbal, like jadi booty and all those things. Now, constant instability. Okay, fine. We'll come to this later. Now, what were the things which were imported to from other part of the world? From the Persian Gulf, pearl, raw silk, wool, dates, dried fruits, rose water. Arabia, coffee, gold, drugs, and honey. China, tea, sugar, porcelain, and silk. Tibet, gold, musk, and woolen cloth. Singapore, tin. Indonesia, spices, perfume. Arak and sugar. Africa, ivory, drugs. Europe, woolen cloth, copper. Okay, so these are the some of the things which are in a way, just give me a moment, which are in a way imported from other part of the world. Okay, okay, so these are the list of the things which were exported from India, and then there simultaneously there is a list of things which were imported to India. Now, few of the students will find it difficult to remember, but this is something which you have to mug up. There is no other way out, and these are the things which are asked in the examination. Okay, there might be a question also, and will come to it in right now. Okay, yeah. So let me finish few of the things, and we'll discuss that question also. But there is no other way out. Believe me, you have to remember that what are the things India was exporting in the 18th century and 19th century, and what were the things which we are importing. In the long run, obviously, I'll give you a basic idea that we became or we were made by the Britishers the exporter of raw material, but that will happen later on, not right now. Okay. Okay. Now, constant instability led to insecurity. Now, what is this instability I was talking about? So again, I have told you that one of the major problem was the rise of small territories, small kingdoms, small princely states, and this small kingdom and princely state meant more insecurity. Okay, because one was not answerable to other, leave being answerable. It was more like one empire wanted to decimate the business for the other empire. One small kingdom wanted to decimate the business for other kingdom, and that's with that intention the insecurity on the road and everything started very much. Okay, so constant stability, trade routes and trade towns. Now, some of the example I've just mentioned to make sure that you have the basic idea that how difficult trading must have become in these times. So Nadir Shah invasions on Delhi. Maratha raided Delhi in 37, 50 and 72. 1937 also Maratha raided Delhi. In 1737 Marathas, not 1700s we are talking about. So 1737 Marathas raided Delhi. 1750s Marathas against raided Delhi. 1772 Marathas not only raided Delhi, they brought back the Mughal ruler from Allahabad to Delhi. And from 1770s to 1803, Marathas only controlled Delhi. In 1803, Delhi got into the control of the Britishers. So continuously for this period, okay, someone here and there, like for example in 1788, the Afghans, Rohilla Afghans attacked Delhi. This was the time when Rohilla Afghans actually blinded the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, okay, in 1788. So those things also happened. In between all this was happening, Ahmad Shah Abdali raided not only once but 8 times. Okay, the fifth during his fifth raid, the whole battle of Panipat took place. Okay, Jats raided Delhi. Again, I've explained you Jat raiding Delhi in 1740 during the time of Surajmal. Rohillas raided Delhi in 1788. Okay, and with this rise of the regional power, many of the toll stations and all those evolved, and this further insecurity and rising taxation that actually degraded and depreciated the whole business of the Indian subcontinent. Okay, now India still remained the center for manufacturing. So whether it was cotton, silk, sugar, jute, dye stuff, mineral, we were exporting these things. Okay, we had shipbuilding industries in Maharashtra, Andhra, and Bengal. We said there was textile industry on extensive level. For example, in Bengal, Bihar, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, present day UP, Punjab, Andhra, Mysore, Kashmir, all these places were involved in different kind of textile products, and these are again something to be remembered for. Okay, for example, in Bengal, Dhaka and Murshidabad both were famous for textile work. Okay, that famous muslin. Okay, the Dhaka muslin is very famous even now. In Bihar, Patna was a famous center. Gujarat, Surat, Ahmedabad, and Bharuch, or Broch, it was called back then. Madhya Pradesh, Chanderi. Maharashtra, Burhanpur. UP, Jaunpur, Varanasi, Lucknow, and Agra. Punjab, Lahore, and Multan. Andhra Pradesh, or present day Andhra region, Machilipatnam, Aurangabad, Shikakol, and Vishakhapatnam. Mysore, Bangalore, Madras, Coimbatore, and Madurai. Kashmir, Anantnag, Ladakh for woolen clothes. So everywhere you will see that the influence of textile industry was extensive, huge. Okay. Now let's see one of the questions which have been asked in CSE PYQ 2018, and if you have seen the past two slides, you will be able to answer it. The question was, the staple commodities of export by the English East India Company from Bengal in the middle of the 18th century were what? So there are options: raw cotton, oil seeds and opium, sugar, salt, zinc and lead, copper, silver, gold, spices and tea, cotton, silk, saltpeter and opium. Suppose you don't know anything. Suppose you get confused in such kind of question. Take a moment. Suppose you are like, okay, fine, I don't have any clue. What is all this? Okay, I don't remember. I have forgot it. But still, you know, in Bengal, that in Bengal, okay, there are certain things which are not available. For example, copper is not available. Silver, gold, these are not being exported. If someone says, okay, gold is coming to Bengal, you can expect, okay, fine, trade is well, but gold is getting exported. No, India was never an exporter of gold. इंडिया में गोल्ड बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं होता. इंडिया में KGF में थोड़ा सा गोल्ड होता है बस. Okay, so C option anyway is wrong. Okay, cool. Now, after that, zinc, salt, these are lead. Lead to even now we don't have anywhere. We are looking for lead because China is getting so much lead for their lead ion, lithium ion battery and all that. Okay, so lead to abhi bhi nahi hamare paas. Okay, so B option is also wrong. Now you have two options. First one, raw cotton and oil seeds and opium, and the fourth one, cotton, silk, saltpeter, and opium. Now, opium, yes, that is right. Raw cotton, that is also right. Cotton is also here. Opium is also here. This is oil seed and this is silk and saltpeter. Now, if you consider oil seeds, oil seeds is something which you get on the west coast of India. Oil seeds you will get from this region. Okay. You don't get oil seed on the Bengal side. Okay. So if you don't get it in 21st century, you didn't get it in the 18th century also. So oil seed is very difficult to get. Suppose अगर कोई कहे नहीं हम तो पौधा लगा के उगा ही लेते थे, kind of fine, ठीक है, but on a generic level you don't get it over there. And on the other hand, saltpeter and silk is something which is true. There is a place called as Qasim Bazaar, okay, which was famous for silk industry. Okay, and even in this slide we have mentioned this thing, what India exported over there, saltpeter, silk. We have not nowhere it is mentioned about oil seeds in extensive amount. Okay, so from here you will be able to answer this question. So only the option number 4 is correct. Okay, so that's how you do in question. Because many a time you will find like, sir, ये NCERT से direct तो नहीं था. This was not a direct question from NCERT. Yep, this was not a direct question from NCERT. But if you have done your NCERT properly, okay, if you have gone through all those options and you have a basic understanding of things, you will be able to segregate between option A and D. And from there, if you remember saltpeter and silk from your NCERT, then you will be able to answer this question. Okay, so that is how it was to be answered. Okay, so what we will do is we'll end the session here and we will start more detail about social and cultural life in the next session right from here. Okay, so try these questions, try other PYQs also. Make sure we will try to add some mains questions also in the coming lectures. I didn't wanted to put in too many of the mains question immediately because don't want to terrorize you people, but now enough lectures have been done that we can start with the mains answer writing also. Okay, so we'll end the lecture now. Have a nice day, enjoy, and thank you.